Hello, everyone. Let's move this right over here. Let's get going. Since I missed last night, let's get going with 1 Kings 10, okay? And this is the Queen of Sheba visits Solomon. So here we go. When the Queen of Sheba, and I believe Sheba was in Africa. I could be wrong, but that's where we're going to leave it. When the Queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon and his relationship to the Lord, she came to test Solomon with hard questions. Arriving at Jerusalem with a very great caravan with camels carrying spices, large quantities of gold and precious stones, she came to Solomon and talked with him about all that she had on her mind. Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. When the Queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon and the palace he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his officials, the attending servants in their robes, his cupbearers, and the burnt offerings he made at the temple of the Lord, she was overwhelmed. She said to the king, "The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true. But I didn't believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told me. In wisdom and wealth, you far exceeded the report I heard. How happy your people must be. How happy your officials who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. Praise be to the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and placed you on the throne of Israel. Because of the Lord's eternal love for Israel, he's made you king to maintain justice and righteousness." And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, large quantities of spices and precious stones. Never again were so many spices brought in as those the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Hiram's ships brought gold from Ophir, Ophir, and from there they brought great cargoes of almug wood and precious stones. The king used the almug wood to make supports for the temple of the Lord and for the royal palace, and to make harps and lyres for the musicians. So he made instruments too. So much almug wood has never been imported or seen since that day. King Solomon gave the Queen of Sheba all she desired and asked for, besides what he had given her out of his royal bounty. Then she left and returned with her retinue to her own country. The weight of the gold that Solomon received yearly was 666 talents. That's an interesting number, Not including the revenues from merchants and traders and from all the Arabian kings and the governors of the territories. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 600 shekels of gold went into each shield. He also made 300 small shields of hammered gold with 3 minas, M-I-N-A-S, that's a measure, of gold in each shield. The king put them in the palace of the forest of Lebanon. Then the king made a great throne covered with ivory and overlaid with fine gold. The throne had 6 steps and its back had a rounded top. Now, I'm assuming you're using your imagination, okay? On both sides of the seat were armrests with a lion standing beside each of them. 12 lions stood on the 6 steps, one at either end of each step. Nothing like it had ever been made for any other kingdom. All King Solomon's goblets were gold, and all the household articles in the palace of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's days. The king had a fleet of trading ships at sea, along with the ships of Hiram. Once every 3 years it returned carrying gold, silver, and ivory, and apes and baboons. King Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. The whole world sought audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom God had put in his heart. Year after year, everyone who came brought a gift, articles of silver and gold, robes, weapons and spices, and horses and mules. Solomon accumulated chariots and horses. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horses, which he kept in the chariot cities and also with him in Jerusalem. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar as plentiful as fig trees in the foothills. Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt and from Kue. The royal merchants purchased them from Kue at the current price. They imported a chariot from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver and a horse for 150. They also exported them to all the kings of the Hittites and of the Arameans. 1 Kings 11. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter. Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after other gods." Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord, his God. Sort of like Samson, tempted by women, huh? Women are very powerful beings. We're very powerful creatures, and you know it, and I know it. As the heart of David, his father, had been. Okay, so he was not fully devoted to the Lord, his God, as the heart of his father David had been. He followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. That's the one they sacrificed their children to. So Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He didn't follow the Lord completely as David, his father, had done. On a hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. He did the same for all his foreign wives who burned incense and offered sacrifices to their gods. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who'd appeared to him twice. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon didn't keep the Lord's command. So the Lord said to Solomon, "Since this is your attitude, and you've not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates." Humiliating, huh? "Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I won't do it during your lifetime. I'll tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David my servant and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen." So he's going to tear the kingdom out, but leave him with one tribe. Then the Lord raised up against Solomon an adversary. This is how the Lord punishes, with war, enemies. Hadad, the Edomite, that's from the line of Esau, from the royal line of Edom, which is Esau, not Israel, which was Jacob. Earlier, when David was fighting with Edom, Joab, the commander of the army who'd gone up to bury the dead, had struck down all the men in Edom. Joab and all the Israelites stayed there for 6 months until they destroyed all the men in Edom. But Hadad, still only a boy, fled to Egypt with some Edomite officials who had served his father. They set out from Midian and went to Paran. Then, taking people from Paran with them, they went to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave Hadad a house and land and provided him with food. Pharaoh was so pleased with Hadad that he gave him a sister of his own wife, Queen Tahpenes, in marriage. The sister of Tahpenes bore him a son named Genubath, whom Tahpenes brought up in the royal palace. There Genubath lived with Pharaoh's own children. So he's getting favor from the Egyptians. While he was in Egypt, Hadad heard that David rested with his ancestors and that Joab, the commander of the army, was also dead. Then Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Let me go, that I may return to my own country." "What have you lacked here that you want to go back to your own country?" Pharaoh asked. "Nothing," Hadad replied, "but do let me go." And God raised up against Solomon another adversary, Rezon, R-E-Z-O-N, son of Eliada, who had fled from his master Hadadezer, king of Zobah. When David destroyed Zobah's army, Rezon gathered a band of men around him and became their leader. They went to Damascus, where they settled and took control. Rezon was Israel's adversary as long as Solomon lived, adding to the trouble caused by Hadad. So Rezon ruled in Aram and was hostile towards Israel. Also, Jeroboam, son of Nebat, rebelled against the king. He was one of Solomon's officials, an Ephraimite from Zeradah, and his mother was a widow named Zeruiah. Here's the account of how he rebelled against the king. Solomon had built the terraces and had filled in the gap in the wall of the city of David his father. Now, Jeroboam was a man of standing, and when Solomon saw how well the young man did his work, he put him in charge of the whole labor force of the tribes of Joseph. And we remember Joseph. He was the one that was thrown in the pit and became the second in command over all Egypt, fed his family when they came to him, not knowing it was him, fed them out of the granaries and the storehouse that he had saved up because he knew there was going to be a famine, and was therefore reunited with his family, who repented in front of him and thought he was going to kill them, but he was merciful. Okay, so Jeroboam was put in charge of the whole labor force of the tribes of Joseph. About that time, Jeroboam was going out of Jerusalem, and Ahijah, the prophet of Shiloh, met him on the way, wearing a new coat. The two of them were alone out in the country, and Ahijah took hold of the new cloak he was wearing and tore it into 12 pieces. Then he said to Jeroboam, "Take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. See, I'm going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes. But for the sake of my servant David and the city of Jerusalem, which I've chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, he will have 1 tribe. I'll do this because they've forsaken me and worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Molech, the god of the Ammonites, and have not walked in obedience to me, nor done what is right in my eyes, nor kept my decrees and laws, as David, Solomon's father, did. But I won't take the whole kingdom out of Solomon's hand. I've made him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of David, my servant, whom I chose, and who obeyed my commands and decrees." So do you see what we're learning about the Lord? We're learning how the Lord thinks of us by listening to how he's dealing with us, the human race, okay? "I will take the kingdom from his son's hands and give you 10 tribes. I'll give 1 tribe to his son so that David, my servant, may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I chose to put my name. However, as for you, I'll take you and you'll rule over all that your heart desires. You will be king over Israel. If you do whatever I command you and walk in obedience to me and do what's right in my eyes by obeying my decrees and commands, as David my servant did, I will be with you. I'll build you a dynasty as enduring as the one I built for David and will give Israel to you. I will humble David's descendants because of this, but not forever." Okay, so this was the prophecy from Ahijah. Let's go back here to Jeroboam. Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam fled to Egypt to Shishak the king and stayed there until Solomon's death. As for the other events of Solomon's reign, all he did and the wisdom he displayed, are they not written in the book of the Annals of Solomon? Now, we probably don't have that book. Okay, a lot of these books that are mentioned are lost. Okay, the Book of Wars, we don't know where that is. And I believe Moses wrote that book too. I could be wrong. Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel 40 years. Then he rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David, his father, and Rehoboam, his son, succeeded him as king. 1 Kings 12. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone there to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard this, he was still in Egypt, where he'd fled from King Solomon. He returned from Egypt. So they sent for Jeroboam, and he and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we'll serve you." Rehoboam, this is Solomon's son, answered, "Go away for 3 days and then come back to me." So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. "How would you advise me to answer these people?" he asked. They replied, "If today you'll be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants." But Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him and consulted the young men who'd grown up with him and were serving him. He asked them, "What's your advice? How should we answer these people who say to me, 'Lighten the yoke your father put on us'?" The young men who'd grown up with him replied, "These people have said to you, 'Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter.' Now tell them, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I'll make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I'll scourge you with scorpions.'" Such is youth. These were his friends, right? His buddies. 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to Rehoboam, as the king had said, "Come back to me in 3 days." The king answered the people harshly, rejecting the advice given him by the elders. He followed the advice of the young men and said, "My father made your yoke heavy. I'll make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I'll scourge you with scorpions." So the king didn't listen to the people, for this turn of events was from the Lord to fulfill the word the Lord had spoken to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through Ahijah the Shilonite. So the Lord is using this to fulfill the prophecy that Jeroboam, who would have served Rehoboam, is now going to fight him and take over. When all Israel saw that the king refused to listen to them, they answered the king, "What share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, Israel. Look after your own house, David." So the Israelites went home. But as for the Israelites who were living in the towns of Judah, Rehoboam still ruled over them. King Rehoboam sent out Adoniram, who was in charge of forced labor, but all Israel stoned him to death. So they're done with Rehoboam, Solomon's son. King Rehoboam, however, managed to get into his chariot and escape to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day, which is in Judah, in Jerusalem. When all the Israelites heard that Jeroboam had returned, they sent and called him to the assembly and made him king over all Israel. Exactly what the prophet said. Only the tribe of Judah remained loyal to the house of David. When Rehoboam, Solomon's son, arrived in Jerusalem, he mustered all Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 able young men, to go to war against Israel and to regain the kingdom for Rehoboam, son of Solomon. He's not going to prosper, is he? Because the Lord's already said, I'm going to tear the kingdom, Solomon, out of your son's hands. I'll give him one to be a light, to me from Judah. But the other 10 tribes, because Judah is the tribe of Benjamin and Judah, and the other 10 tribes of Israel are Israel, okay? But this word of God came to Shemaiah, the man of God. "Say to Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, to all Judah and Benjamin and to the rest of the people, this is what the Lord says. Do not go up to fight against your brothers, the Israelites. Go home, every one of you, for this is my doing." So they obeyed the word of the Lord and went home again as the Lord had ordered. So at least he's that wise, right? Then Jeroboam fortified Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there. From there, he went out and built up Peniel. Jeroboam thought to himself, the kingdom will now likely revert to the house of David if these people go up to offer sacrifices at the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. They will again give their allegiance to their Lord Rehoboam, king of Judah. They'll kill me and return to King Rehoboam. After seeking advice, the king made 2 golden calves. He said to the people, "It's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." What a jerk. One he set up in Bethel and the other in Dan, and this thing became a sin. The people came to worship the one at Bethel and went as far as Dan to worship the other. Isn't it amazing how people just go back to their sin? It's just amazing, isn't it? Jeroboam built shrines. Now, this is not Solomon's son. This is the other one who the prophet spoke to and who God said he was going to give him 10 tribes, the kingdom of Israel. Jeroboam built shrines on high places and appointed. So this is not a godly man who's taken Israel. So God's basically shoving their adultery down their throats with this king. He's going, you wanted it, you got it. And appointed priests from all sorts of people, even though they were not Levites. He instituted a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the festival held in Judah, and offered sacrifices on the altar. So he's bound and determined that they never go to Judah, okay? This he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves he had made, the golden ones. And at Bethel, he also installed priests at the high places he had made. On the 15th day of the 8th month, a month of his own choosing, he offered sacrifices on the altar he'd built at Bethel. So he instituted the festival for the Israelites and went up to the altar to make offerings. So it's sort of like living under a bad king. If there are any godly people in Israel, which I'm sure they were, they had to watch these altars going up to all these weird gods, see other priests coming in that weren't Levites, and you know, just generally say, wow, you know, our land is being ruined, the way some of us feel about America today, you know, that this leader has ruined us. All right, so 1 Kings 13. By the word of the Lord, a man of God came from Judah to Bethel as Jeroboam was standing by the altar to make an offering. So by the word of the Lord, a man of God came from Judah, Solomon's son Rehoboam's area that he rules, to Bethel, which is in Israel, as Jeroboam was standing by the altar to make an offering, probably the golden calf altar. By the word of the Lord, he cried out against the altar. Altar, altar! This is what the Lord says. A son named Josiah will be born to the house of David. On you, he will sacrifice the priests of the high places who make offerings here, and human bones will be burned on you. So this man of God is pointing at these altars and saying, this is what's going to happen. That same day, the man of God gave a sign. This is the sign the Lord has declared. The altar will be split apart and the ashes on it will be poured out. So God really kind of still wasn't having it, was he? When King Jeroboam heard what the man of God cried out against the altar at Bethel, he stretched out his hand from the altar and said, seize him! But the hand he stretched out towards the man shriveled up so that he could not pull it back. Also, the altar was split apart and its ashes poured out according to the sign given by the man of God by the word of the Lord. Then the king said to the man of God, intercede with the Lord your God and pray for me that my hand may be restored. So the man of God interceded with the Lord, and the king's hand was restored and became as it was before. The king said to the man of God, come home with me for a meal and I'll give you a gift. But the man of God answered the king, even if you were to give me half your possessions, I wouldn't go with you, nor would I eat bread or drink water here. For I was commanded by the word of the Lord, you must not eat bread or drink water or return by the way you came. So he took another road and didn't return by the way he had come to Bethel. Now, there was a certain old prophet living in Bethel, whose sons came and told him all the man of God had done there that day. They also told their father what he had said to the king. Their father asked them, which way did he go? And his sons showed him which road the man of God from Judah had taken. So he said to his sons, saddle the donkey for me. And when they'd saddled the donkey for him, he mounted it and rode after the man of God. He found him sitting under an oak tree and asked, are you the man of God who came from Judah? I am, he replied. So the prophet said to him, come home with me and eat. The man of God said, I can't turn back and go with you, nor can I eat bread or drink water with you in this place. I've been told by the word of the Lord, you must not eat bread or drink water there or return by the way you came. The old prophet answered, I too am a prophet as you are, and an angel said to me by the word of the Lord, bring him back with you to your house so that he may eat bread and drink water. In parentheses, but he was lying to him. So the man of God returned with him and ate and drank in his house. While they were sitting at the table, the word of the Lord came to the old prophet who brought him back. he cried out to the man of God who'd come from Judah. This is what the Lord says. You've defied the word of the Lord and have not kept the command of the Lord your God gave you. You came back and ate bread and drank water in the place where he told you not to eat or drink. Therefore, your body will not be buried in the tomb of your ancestors. Now, in those days, that was a big deal. When the man of God had finished eating and drinking, the prophet who'd brought him back saddled his donkey for him. As he went on his way, a lion met him on the road and killed him, and his body was left lying on the road with both the donkey and the lion standing beside it. Some people who passed by saw the body lying there with the lion standing beside the body, and they went and reported it in the city where the old prophet lived. When the prophet who'd brought him back from his journey heard of it, he said, "It's the man of God who defied the word of the Lord. The Lord has given him over to the lion, which has mauled him and killed him, as the word of the Lord had warned him." The prophet said to his son, "Saddle the donkey for me," and they did so. Then he went out and found the body lying on the road with the donkey and the lion standing beside it. The lion had neither eaten the body nor mauled the donkey. So the prophet picked up the body of the man of God, laid it on the donkey, and brought it back to his own city to mourn for him and bury him. Then he laid the body in his own tomb, and they mourned over him and said, "Alas, my brother." After burying him, he said to his sons, "When I die, bury me in the grave where the man of God is buried. Lay my bones beside his bones." For the message he declared by the word of the Lord against the altar in Bethel and against all the shrines on the high places in the towns of Samaria will certainly come true. Even after this, Jeroboam did not change his evil ways, but once more appointed priests for the high places from all sorts of people. Anyone who wanted to become a priest, he consecrated for the high places. This was the sin of the house of Jeroboam that led to its downfall and to its destruction from the face of the earth. Now, I have no idea. Let's just look really quick. This is 1 Kings chapter 13. I just want to see if we can get an idea from Pastor Guzik. Why this prophet, 1 Kings 13, why this prophet would lie to him. Enduring word, 1 Kings 13. Here we go. I don't know why this old prophet would lie to this man of God and sort of fox him into sinning like that. So here's what he says. An old prophet. Okay, now it says it seems that this was a faithful prophet to the Lord. Remember I said there's probably some faithful Israelites that are freaked out watching their land be destroyed by a heathen king. It says it seems that this was a faithful prophet to the Lord. This demonstrates that not every godly person left Israel for Judah. Some still remained behind. The prophet from Bethel invited the unnamed man of God to his home. The man of God refused, and he lied to him. It says the prophet from Bethel gave a false word from the Lord, trying to persuade the man of God from Judah to change his course from doing exactly what God told him. He said an angel spoke to him. And it says, perhaps this was true, and perhaps it was a deceiving angel. In other words, perhaps it was a demon. Satan and his messengers can appear as angels of light. So he might have been telling the truth when he said, an angel appeared to me and said, it's okay for you to come home. And then when the guy got killed, he was like, oh my God. So he might have had a demonic vision and not known, because demons can appear as angels of light. The man of God from Judah listened to the lie from the prophet of Bethel. He did this for several reasons. The prophet from Bethel was probably older and had the respect of the man of God. The prophet from Bethel, this is the old man, identified with the man of God. The prophet from Bethel claimed a spectacular experience. An angel spoke to me. The prophet from Bethel claimed to speak for the Lord. The prophet from Bethel did not seem to be an idolater who should be shunned. Okay, so it says here, the prophet from Bethel offered no reward other than simple food. bread and water. Eat bread, drink water. No matter how natural and seductive this enticement was, it was the duty of the man of God to resist it. He had a word from God to guide his actions and should receive no other word except through dramatic and direct confirmation by God's Spirit. So he should have gotten a confirmation before he went to this older prophet's house. His failure at this point ended his usefulness as a man of God. When he had, when we have received a direct command fresh from the lips of Christ, we must act on it and not be turned aside by a different suggestion. Yeah, because when I'm listening to the story, I'm like, I wouldn't have listened to the old prophet. I don't know why he did. I wouldn't have. I would have done exactly what God told me to do because that would be the only word I had. I wouldn't be trusting someone else's word. I'd be like, well, that has to be confirmed in me, and the Lord hasn't told me that I was going to meet you or that I could go home and eat and drink with you. We must not be turned aside by a different suggestion made to us through the lips of professing Christians. There's a lot of people out there who say they're Christians and they're not. Now, this old prophet probably was not an idolater and a true believer, but once again, you don't just do what anybody says or you're going to get tossed to and fro like the waves on the sea. You have to just do what you know to do until the Lord tells you different, and not by the lips of any old person that you just met and you don't know. Okay, remember that, okay? Deal with God at first hand. God never contradicts himself in his dealings with his servants. Let us be true to his commands, refusing to be deflected from the path of obedience, even by an angel from heaven. So we don't need to go much further because we know that he just listened to maybe he was hungry and he thought, okay, good, you saw an angel, and they didn't bother trying to figure out if it was a good or bad angel because that wasn't the point. It was like, the point was that this guy disobeyed the Lord. And it ended in his death, okay? And that's very sad. You know, you can be deceived unto death. I'm absolutely sure of it, okay? So you want to just stick with what the Lord's told you and see that through to its conclusion rather than listening. You know, that means, because if you don't, it means anybody can come up to you and say, oh, well, an angel told me, and you'll go for it. No. Okay, no, okay? You stick with what the Lord's told you. The Lord will come and tell you, oh, it's okay, okay? Without that confirmation, don't look right or left, which is something I'm always telling you. Don't look right or left on this walk. Keep your eyes on the hem of Jesus's garment and keep following him. And don't listen to anybody else, no matter how godly they appear, because we are in a very wicked world and in a very dangerous time. And this is a time where there will be deceiving spirits and deceiving people. And it's going to get worse, okay? So you want to make sure you have your eye on the bead, which is the hem of Christ's garment, and you recognize him in your life because you're talking to him, right? In prayer, you're getting to know each other. He already knows you, but you know, you're getting to know him as you talk to him. And you're just keeping your eyes right on him. You are not looking left or right. And you're certainly not listening to strangers who tell you they saw an angel. So he made a bad mistake and we should take a lesson from it. I love you very much. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll pick it up at 1 Kings 14. I'll see you then. Don't forget to pray. Start developing that relationship with the Lord, okay? Love you. Good night.